The sky over New Mexico burned red like dying embers. Dust Hollow sat small and lonely in a barren valley, walled by towering cliffs. The desert wind swept fine sand across the worn boots of men gathered outside the saloon. In the middle of the street, a young woman was shoved forward. Her buckskin dress was worn and dusty, the hem frayed, long black hair loose and tangled in the wind. Her face was sharp, proud, yet her eyes wary. She was Ayanna, daughter of the Apache Chief, though here few remembered and fewer cared. A tall cowboy, whiskey bottle swinging in his grip, sneered, "Come here. Let me see the face that dares walk this street." Laughter rolled from the crowd. Ayanna said nothing, clutching the strap of her deerskin pouch, scanning for an escape. Then, memories crashed back. That day, under a sky just as red, she'd stood inside the fire circle of her people. Her father's eyes were heavy as stone when he spoke words like a blade. "You broke the law of our ancestors. You are no longer my blood." She hadn't cried. She'd only looked at him one last time before walking away from the village, carrying nothing but the pouch her mother made when she was born. The sound of hoofbeats pulled her back to the present. A lone rider approached, dust trailing behind. His coat was road-worn, his hat brim low, hiding most of his eyes. Ethan Cole, former cavalryman, a man known to speak less than desert stone. He reined in his horse before the crowd, voice deep and cold as post-sunset shadows. "Let her go." The men paused. One smirked. "Do you even know who she is? Chief's daughter. Cast out. Nobody here wants her." Ethan swung down, hand resting lightly on his revolver, not drawing, but making a point. "Don't care who she is. I care that you're wrong." Silence. The wind rattled the saloon sign, the old wood groaning like it agreed. The cowboy stepped back, releasing her. Ethan turned to Ayanna. "Got a place to go?" A pause. Then she shook her head. "Then walk with me." They moved on, leaving behind eyes full of curiosity, contempt, and the whisper of desert wind, carrying stories from long ago. Ethan led Ayanna to a small boarding house on the edge of Dust Hollow. Night had fallen, the crescent moon mingling with the dim yellow of oil lamps. The room was bare. A narrow bed, a wooden table, and a small hearth. He set a water pouch on the table and gestured to the chair. "Sit. Drink." She sat, still clutching her deerskin pouch like it held her whole past. After a moment, she spoke, her voice rough as sand-filled wind. "Do you know why I was cast out?" Ethan shook his head. The firelight flickered over his face, carving his features deeper. She drew a long breath, eyes fixed on the shadow between two candles. "One winter, when my father was sick, I went to the white men's trading post to barter for meat and salt, but they took more than what I brought." Her hands clenched on the pouch until her knuckles went pale. "When I returned, the people looked at me like I was tainted. Some said I went willingly. Others claimed I brought bad spirits to the village. And my father, he didn't ask. He just told me to go. Immediately." Ethan said nothing, letting the winds whistle at the window and the crackle of fire fill the space between them. She looked at him, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "Do you think they were right?" He shook his head, voice low. "I think they feared the truth more than they loved you." In that moment, a sound rose from the street below, hoofbeats, drunken laughter. Ethan stood, drawing the curtains tighter. "Stay here tonight. Don't go out." The hoofbeats grew louder, hammering at the heart. Ayanna watched Ethan draw the curtains tighter, worry flickering in her eyes. "Are they here for me?" Ethan turned, not answering right away. He pulled a revolver from a leather holster hanging on the chair, checked the chamber, and set it on the table. "No one here has the right to take your life, but they'll try." Laughter erupted outside. Through the slit in the curtain, Ayanna saw 3 men on horseback stop in front of the saloon, lamplight spilling over their sunburned faces. One wore a torn straw hat, a long scar carved down his cheek, eyes scanning the street. "They were at the trading post," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They are the reason I was cast out." Ethan's gaze fixed on her, calm but cutting like sand on raw skin. "So the past's come knocking." He rose, slipped on his duster, pulled the brim of his hat low. "Lock the door. If I don't call your name, don't open it." Her hand grabbed his, trembling. "What will you do?" "Talk." His eyes, though, were cold as a knife's edge in moonlight. Ethan stepped onto the porch, night dew clinging to the brim of his hat. He walked straight toward the saloon, where banjo strings tangled with crude laughter. When he pushed the door open, whiskey fumes and cigar smoke slapped him in the face. The 3 men looked up instantly. "I hear you're looking for someone," Ethan said, voice steady as a lake before the storm. Scarface grinned, crooked and mean. "Yeah, a lost bird, and I think you know where she is." The air stretched tight as a drawn bowstring. Card players in the back froze mid-hand. The ceiling fan clicking overhead the only sound. "If you want her," Ethan said slowly, "you'll have to go through me first." The saloon's air had thickened, heavy and tense. The chatter was gone, leaving only the faint crackle of oil in the hanging lamp. Ethan stood tall, hand close to his holster. Scarface tilted his head, smirking. "You're siding with her? A half-blood Apache that even her own tribe cast out?" Ethan's reply was dry, sharp. "I side with what's right." The other 2 men laughed, rough and mocking. One stepped forward, fingers brushing the hilt of a knife. Ethan didn't draw, but his gaze cut through the space between them like a drawn blade. "One more step, and I take it as your last choice." The man froze, glancing at Scarface. No one wanted to be the first to gamble. Finally, Scarface spat on the wooden floor, eyes narrowing. "Fine, but I'll be back. And when I do, both you and her will pay." Ethan didn't answer. He stepped back toward the door, opened it, and walked into the night. At the small house at the end of the street, Ayanna sat close to the window, clutching a thin blanket. Every hoofbeat, every thud of boots on wood sounded like drums heralding a storm. When Ethan's steps creaked on the porch, she rose quickly and opened the door. "What did they say?" Her voice trembled slightly. Ethan hung his hat on the wooden peg, set his revolver on the table. "They'll be back. Soon." She stayed quiet, then exhaled softly. "I've been running too long. Maybe it's time to stop." Their eyes met, with nothing between them but the whisper of wind against the wooden walls and the sway of a lone oil lamp. The saloon's air had thickened, heavy and tense. The chatter was gone, leaving only the faint crackle of oil in the hanging lamp. Ethan stood tall, hand close to his holster. Scarface tilted his head, smirking. "You're siding with her? A half-blood Apache that even her own tribe cast out?" Ethan's reply was dry, sharp. "I side with what's right." The other 2 men laughed, rough and mocking. One stepped forward, fingers brushing the hilt of a knife. Ethan didn't draw, but his gaze cut through the space between them like a drawn blade. "One more step, and I take it as your last choice." The man froze, glancing at Scarface. No one wanted to be the first to gamble. Finally, Scarface spat on the wooden floor, eyes narrowing. "Fine, but I'll be back. And when I do, both you and her will pay." Ethan didn't answer. He stepped back toward the door, opened it, and walked into the night. At the small house at the end of the street, Ayanna sat close to the window, clutching a thin blanket. Every hoofbeat, every thud of boots on wood sounded like drums heralding a storm. When Ethan's steps creaked on the porch, she rose quickly and opened the door. "What did they say?" Her voice trembled slightly. Ethan hung his hat on the wooden peg, set his revolver on the table. "They'll be back. Soon." She stayed quiet, then exhaled softly. "I've been running too long. Maybe it's time to stop." Their eyes met, with nothing between them but the whisper of wind against the wooden walls and the sway of a lone oil lamp. Dawn in Dust Hollow wasn't peaceful. The first light carried a pale gold hue, cutting through the fine dust hanging in the air, forming sharp diagonal beams. Ethan led his horse out to the corral, silently checking the reins, while Ayanna stoked the fire for coffee. "They'll be back," Ethan said, like he was talking about rain that was bound to come. Ayanna set the pot on the table, nodding slightly. "I know. They've followed me from the village all the way here. They think I'm merchandise they can sell anywhere." Ethan's gaze narrowed. "Who are they?" She drew a breath, fingers tightening around the tin handle. "Slave hunters, a loose gang, most of them ex-soldiers thrown out of the army. They know the border and the places where no one asks questions. I escaped them once, but—" The unfinished sentence was enough for Ethan to understand. Once such men had their eyes on you, they never let go. He set a cup of coffee in front of her. "Stay in today. I'll see what they're up to." A flicker of worry crossed her face. "Alone?" Ethan shrugged into his coat, tossing back. "I'm used to it." Outside, hoofbeats echoed along the main street. 3 riders stood in front of the saloon. One, a big man with a pale scar down his left cheek. His eyes scanned toward the house where Ayanna stayed. Ethan stepped out from the corner, hand loose, but his walk left no doubt he was ready to shoot if it came to that. The scarred man smirked as Ethan stepped out. "Well, the old cavalry. You're picking her side?" Ethan closed the distance slowly. "I'm picking the side that's right." The saloon door creaked. A few curious faces peeked out. Scarface motioned to his men. One moved left, the other to the right. Herding tactics. Ethan slowly removed his gloves, voice low like gravel rolling in a dry creek. "If you want to try, you'd better shoot faster than me." The air tightened. The wind hissed through the gaps in the rooftops like a taut string. Then, a metallic click came from the porch. Ayanna, holding Ethan's old Winchester, standing in the shadows. Her gaze was steady, the barrel low but enough to remind them they were covered. Scarface sniffed, motioned retreat. "Not your day, old man, but that day will come." They mounted up, iron hooves clattering on the street. Ethan turned to Ayanna, simply asking, "You know how to shoot?" She replied flatly, "My father taught me." Ethan nodded, half satisfied, half concerned. He knew the game had only just begun. That night, the small house glowed with lamplight and the scent of burning wood. Ethan cleaned his revolver while Ayanna sat at the table, gaze far away. "Do you know why I was cast out of my tribe?" she asked, voice rough. Ethan set the gun down, silent. "A group of young men in the village smeared me, said I brought shame, but truth is, they wanted my father's land. My father is the chief, but the tribal law didn't stand for me. I left, with nothing but what I could carry." Her hand brushed the Winchester. "Since then, everywhere I go, people see a castaway, and the hunters, they smell weakness." Ethan poured her a glass of water. "You've got 2 choices. Keep running, or learn to make sure no one can drive you out again." She looked up at him. In the warm golden light, her eyes no longer held only defense, but a glint, like a blade about to be sharpened. Next morning, thin mist clung to the cactus spines, the early light pouring like honey over the valley. Ethan stood in the yard, sleeves rolled, a Winchester in one hand and an ammo bag in the other. Ayanna stepped out, hair tied back, her face still carrying traces of fatigue, but her eyes had changed. Ethan tossed her the rifle. "Today, I teach you to shoot like someone who survives." She rested the barrel on the ground, checked the chamber, her movements neat. Ethan nodded. "Not bad, but you shoot like a deer hunter. I'll teach you to shoot when 3 men ahead want you dead." They started close range. Ethan lined 3 tin cans on the fence. Fast and precise. No second chances. Shots cracked in the dry air. The first can fell, but the other 2 stood. Ayanna reloaded, lips pressed tight. Ethan stepped behind her, voice low. "Exhale. Squeeze like you're pulling a thread. Don't jerk." This time, all 3 cans dropped. A flicker of a smile crossed her face, quickly hidden. Ethan recognized it, the smile of someone remembering they can still win. On the 3rd day, Ethan took Ayanna to the western hills, windy, steep, and full of loose rock. Perfect for training under pressure. "Chasers won't stand still for you to shoot," Ethan said, handing her a gleaming dagger. "When the bullets run out, this is the last thing between you and death." She took it, the weight solid in her grip. They drilled, running between rocks, finding cover, switching from rifle to blade. Sweat dampened her hair, but her footing grew steadier. During a break, they sat on a ridge overlooking the valley. Ethan asked, "Your father, what would he think seeing you like this?" Ayanna gazed into the distance. "He'd be sad I had to learn this, but he'd know if I want to return, I must be strong enough that no one dares touch me again." A distant gunshot snapped their attention. Down the valley trail, riders approached fast. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Scarface. "They've found us." Ayanna's hand went to her rifle. No longer the hesitant girl from Dust Hollow. The wind shifted, carrying dust from the valley up the hill. Ethan rose, hand on his Winchester, eyes fixed on the riders closing in. Ayanna checked her ammo. Movement steady. No more trembling. "They're about a mile out," Ethan said evenly. "They'll be here in under 10 minutes. Ayanna scanned the terrain, spotting a narrow rock face to the right. "If we hold there, they'll have to come one at a time, easier to control." Ethan nodded. They moved quickly, setting up positions. Hoofbeats grew louder, shouts echoing. Scarface rode at the front, eyes narrowing when he spotted them above. He signaled, and his men fanned out to flank. "They'll try to pinch from 2 sides," Ethan murmured. "You take the right. I'll hold the left." Gunfire erupted. Ayanna's first shot struck a rock inches from a rider's head, forcing him aside. Ethan dropped another with a clean shot. Smoke mixed with dust, the acrid scent of powder heavy in the air. Ayanna breathed deep, eyes locked like a predator's. The firefight dragged on for nearly 10 minutes, but numbers began to tell. A bullet grazed Ethan's shoulder, tearing his shirt and leaving a streak of blood. "You all right?" Ayanna called, her eyes still locked on the scope. "Just a scratch. Keep going." Scarface barked an order, and 2 riders swung wide to flank. Ayanna spotted them and sprinted along the ridge to intercept. Sliding down a rocky slope, she raised her rifle, dropping one before he could draw. The other charged with a knife. Ayanna discarded her gun, drawing the dagger Ethan had given her. They clashed in a whirl of wind and dust. A sharp shoulder shove, a quick slash, the man stumbled and rolled down the hill. Breathing hard, she returned to see Ethan drop another rider. But Scarface remained, his eyes fixed on Ayanna, like a wolf marking prey. The wind picked up, sky darkening. Ethan swapped magazines, eyes meeting Ayanna's briefly enough to exchange unspoken trust. Scarface signaled his men to stop firing. The air froze, broken only by the heavy thud of hooves. He dismounted, dropped his gun, and drew a long blade with a deep red leather hilt. "Daughter of the chief," he sneered.
I've heard your name. Now, hand yourself over, and I'll let him live.
Ayanna gripped her dagger tighter, stepping forward. Ethan moved to block her, but she shook her head. You don't need to shield me. This time, I decide. She stepped out from cover, facing him directly. Moonlight broke through clouds, lighting her face no longer the outcast girl, but an Apache warrior, shoulders squared, eyes burning in the wind. He lunged, blade slicing sideways. Ayanna slipped aside, lowering herself, countering fast and sharp. Steel clashed with a ringing crack, mixing with a whistle of wind through stone. The knife fight lasted only seconds, but each moment stretched like minutes. Scarface was strong and brutal, but Ayanna was faster and used the terrain to her advantage. A swift parry sent his blade flying, clattering on stone. He roared and lunged to tackle her. Ayanna stepped back, pivoted, and used his momentum to flip him hard to the ground. Ethan leveled his rifle instantly. It's over. Ayanna stared at him for a long beat, breath ragged, then turned away. Let him live. This shame will kill him slower than any bullet. Ethan said nothing, but his eyes showed a new respect for her. As they descended the hill, the remaining red vultures melted back, none daring to block their path. At the base, Ayanna looked up at the full moon. For the first time in years, she felt in control of her own destiny. The next morning, dawn bathed the valley in crimson light. Ayanna stood on a hillside, eyes fixed on the distant mountains where her tribe lived. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke once home, now a scar. Ethan came to stand beside her, rifle slung over his shoulder. You're going back? She nodded. I have something to say. To myself. More than to them. Then I'll decide. They rode across grasslands, forded a shallow creek, and stopped at the humble wooden gate of the Apache village. The guard's eyes were cold, sharp as knives. No greeting. The first to step forward was Tahu, her younger brother. His gaze held both anger and pain. Why are you here? We cut you from the tribe long ago. Ayanna drew a deep breath, speaking slowly. I'm not here to ask forgiveness. I'm here to say I survived, and none of you get to define who I am anymore. The air was taut like a drawn bow. A few women emerged, some avoiding her eyes, others watching silently. The village drums sounded, calling everyone to the square. The current chief, an old man with eyes still sharp, stepped forward. He looked Ayanna up and down as if weighing her entire life in a single glance. You brought shame to this tribe. I ordered you exiled. Now you return. What do you want? Ayanna did not flinch. I want you to know you were wrong. I am not shame. I am someone who fought to still be standing here. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded faintly. Others turned away. Ethan stayed silent, his hand closer to his rifle. He knew contempt could turn to violence if one spark was lit. Tahu stepped forward, blocking the space between her and the chief. His voice was deep, but slightly trembling. If you are still blood of this tribe, prove it. Not with words, but with action. Ayanna pressed her lips together. In her eyes, this was not just a challenge. It was the last chance the past had to hold her back. Tahu led Ayanna to the wide training ground outside the village, where warriors once honed their skills. A ring of spectators closed in, eyes a mix of curiosity and doubt. In the center stood a wooden spear, with several bows and arrows laid out. You want to prove yourself? Hit all 3 targets from this distance. Miss, and you leave forever. Ayanna took the bow. Her hand on the wood felt both strange and familiar. Like touching a forgotten piece of childhood. Her heartbeat merged with the sound of the wind. Ethan watched from the edge, his gaze locked on her. She drew the string, arrow whistling through the air, striking dead center on the first target. A few murmurs of approval. The second arrow landed close to the bullseye,
enough to silence doubters.
As she raised the bow for the third, a child's cheer startled a flock of birds. The rush of wings shook the string slightly. Still, Ayanna released the arrow struck the inner ring, just a hair off center.
Tahu stared at her, silent, then turned away. The crowd parted. Their eyes changed no longer just contempt, but a hint of respect.
That night, Ayanna sat by the central fire. A few elders came to share old stories she had once known as a child. Not everyone was welcoming suspicion still hid in some eyes beyond the firelight.
Ethan approached, handing her a blanket. "You've changed the way they see you."
She stared at the flames, voice low.
"I passed a trial, but the old memories remain. The day I was cast out, no one stood for me, not even my mother."
Ethan stayed silent. The night wind stirred her hair, carrying the scent of smoke and burning wood. "If you stay," he said, "stay for what's here now. The past can't be changed." She didn't answer. But in her eyes, the firelight reflected something new. Not just pain, but hope. The next morning, hoofbeats echoed from the mountains. A group of armed riders approached men known for selling weapons to Apache enemies. The chief ordered everyone to prepare for a fight. Ayanna slung her bow over her shoulder. Ethan stood beside her with a thin smile. "Looks like you'll be proving yourself again." As the riders crossed the gate, Ayanna's arrow sliced through the air, striking a wooden post in front of them, forcing their horses to halt. Her voice rang out, "You will not take another step." The air was heavy as lead. The leader narrowed his eyes, but eventually turned back, leaving only a thin cloud of dust in the morning light. The villagers looked at Ayanna differently now, not just recognition, but trust. As evening fell, Ayanna stood at the village's edge. Tahu approached, silent for a moment before saying, "You've done more than I expected. If you wish, the tribe will take you back." Ayanna looked toward Ethan, leaning against the wooden fence, waiting for her answer. She smiled faintly and shook her head. "I found where I belong." She walked to Ethan. He tipped his hat, voice low. "Then let's go." They left the village under the sunset, their shadows stretching long on the dirt road. Behind them, the wind through the pines blended with the tribal drums, no longer a farewell, but a blessing.